Greetings to all fans of good movies. In this video, I'm going to tell you about a dramatic movie called Ruby Sparks.
People don't appear out of thin air.
She did.
How?
I don't know how.
The main character of the movie is a young writer named Calvin Weir-Fields. When he wakes up in the morning, he walks his dog. Then, after making coffee, he rushes into the office as soon as possible to start writing a new book. But that's where his plan ends. His hands rest motionless on the keyboard without writing a word.
Don't look at me like that.
At this point, a phone call becomes a real salvation for our protagonist. His older brother invites him to a joint training session. During the conversation, it becomes clear that, in addition to the creative crisis, Calvin is also experiencing a difficult period in his personal life. He never manages to establish a successful relationship with the right girl. Later, Calvin visits a psychologist, and we find out that he has no friends at all. He even got a dog to meet new people during his walks, but Scotty is afraid of strangers and only scares them away with his behavior. The psychologist sincerely tries to help the guy. At the end of the session, he asks Calvin to write a short story about his dog, without fear of condemnation for readers, because no one will see this work anyway.
Can it be bad?
I'd like it to be very bad.
In the next scene, there is a creative meeting to celebrate the release of the anniversary edition of Calvin's book. We can see that our character is not comfortable in such an environment. He is ashamed of his popularity and only talks to his fans as a courtesy. When Calvin returns home, he hurries to go to bed as soon as possible, but Scotty, during his absence, made a mess of the bed. So Guy's evening is finally spoiled. During the night, Calvin has a pleasant dream in which he meets his ideal acquaintance. The fictional girl is not interested in books at all. She approached Guy only because of his unusual dog.
I like him, just the way he is.
What did you say?
Calvin wakes up in the morning and immediately runs to the typewriter. He spends a few days writing a new novel with the fictional girl as the main character. Left unattended, Scotty finds a woman's shoe somewhere, but Kel doesn't give it much thought and keeps working. At the next appointment with the psychologist, the writer is full of energy. He thanks the doctor for giving him the idea and talks about his new book, in which the main character is a beautiful stranger. During the conversation, Kel begins to realize that he is head over heels in love with her. This idea really scares him because he has had bad experiences with relationships before.
Tell me about her.
Ruby Sparks.
Calvin describes the fictional Ruby in detail, her appearance, mindset, hobbies, and habits. He does it with such confidence, as if he were talking about a real live person. On a weekend, his brother and sister-in-law come to visit. Arriving guests immediately notice a large number of women's items scattered around the house. They assume that Guy finally has a girlfriend, but Calvin explains that all these things were brought to the house by Scotty, and they probably belong to the neighbors. Later, Gary reads his brother's new book. After finishing it, he criticizes the novel for the unnaturalness of the main character. In his opinion, a relationship with such a girl would be impossible in real life, which means readers will not like this work.
Whatever. I might not even finish it.
After bidding farewell to his relatives, Kel returns to his writing. In this chapter, he engages in a pleasant conversation with Ruby while sitting by the pool. It feels as if he is envisioning his ideal date with her. At the end of the chapter, the main characters finally declare their love for each other. Calvin becomes engrossed once again and unintentionally falls asleep at the table. The following day, he is awakened by a phone call. The guy realizes that he is running late for a meeting with a psychologist and still needs to take Scotty for a walk.
I'll take him out.
Great. Thank you. God, what's happening?
Calvin?
What the fuck?
Calvin calms down and gathers the courage to go downstairs again. He thinks he has lost his mind because his fictional character is now standing in front of him, answering all of his questions as if nothing had happened. In a panic, Kel goes back to his office to call his brother, but Gary refuses to believe what he hears. He advises him to meet some real people and take his mind off things. Upon hearing the advice, Calvin arranges to meet one of his fans at a cafe. Ruby, witnessing her lover's strange behavior, asks to join him. On the way to the cafe, Kel tries not to notice Ruby. Once there, he asks her to go shopping, while he himself meets the fan. When Ruby returns from the store, she sees a strange scene. Her boyfriend is sitting at the same table with the stranger, who, in addition, is flirting with him. Outraged, she approaches them.
What's going on? Am I interrupting something?
Just go in.
You can see her?
Yeah. Hey, what? Stop!
What? She's real.
Upon realizing what happened, Calvin can't believe his luck. His perfect fictional girlfriend has miraculously become real. After calming Ruby down, he immediately asks for her forgiveness for his behavior, and they share a kiss. Our characters spend the next few days together. They hanging out and having a good time. The cheerful and carefree Ruby easily manages to lift Calvin out of his usual apathetic state. Having met his brother, Kel honestly tells him about this fantastic event, but Gary refuses to believe his words and advises him to see a psychiatrist as soon as possible. As evidence, the brothers arrive at Calvin's house, where they are greeted on the doorstep by the energetic Ruby. At first, Gary is skeptical about the story. When they are left alone, he assures his brother that the girl is most likely an imposter. She somehow read his manuscript and is just playing the part well. But Kel refutes this version, as Ruby fully embodies her character down to the smallest detail. Then Gary suggests that his brother go up to the office and make one small but noticeable change in the girl's behavior to figure it all out that way. Now, Gary can't believe what's happening. Ruby learned French in an instant and is fluent in it with the guys. Back in the office, Calvin finishes the new sentence, and the girl immediately returns to normal. Sitting at the table, the astonished brother begins showering Ruby with questions. This situation forces Calvin to stop dinner, lest the unsuspecting girl accidentally guess her origins.
This is insane! You manifested a woman with your mind!
As they part ways, our character asks his brother not to tell anyone about this situation and keep it a secret for his sake. Gary agrees but warns him that the infatuation in the relationship does not last long, and Calvin has a unique chance to change the girl at his discretion, even every day. After reflecting on it, Kel replies that his Ruby is perfect and he won't write about her anymore. Upon returning home, Calvin immediately hides the manuscript in his desk under lock and key. After a while, the first disagreements between the couple begin to emerge. Calvin surrounds Ruby with excessive care and actually deprives her of the need to leave the house. One day, seeing her discontent, he nevertheless agrees to go on a little trip and at the same time introduce Ruby to his family. On a weekend, the couple heads out to meet Calvin's family and has fun along the way.
Wow, look at this place.
You asked for it.
I'm Ruby. Hi, Ruby.
Relatives were immediately drawn to Ruby. She effortlessly fit right in with the family from the very first day. One could sense that Calvin, who was typically reserved and private, didn't quite blend in as naturally. However, the same cannot be said about Ruby. She appeared completely at ease in the lively and joyful atmosphere. But it was Calvin who made her this way, which now gives him a reason to regret it. In the evening during dinner, Gary gets very drunk and, losing his temper, begins to hint to those present about Ruby's origins. Calvin immediately interrupts the conversation and leads his drunken brother into his room. The event that happened at the table greatly surprised the relatives. The next day, our characters return home in silence.
Honey, I'm trying to read.
Without thinking, Kel utters a phrase that finally spoils Ruby's mood. As a reconciliation, he gives in to the girl and allows her to enroll in the art class she has been dreaming of for a long time. Additionally, the couple agrees to sleep separately one day a week to get a little break from each other. This experiment works well for Ruby. In a short time, she makes friends and her mood returns to normal. However, for Calvin, this period becomes a real torture. He becomes even more withdrawn and cannot fall asleep when his girlfriend is not around. One day, Ruby calls Guy from a bar and tells him that she won't be able to come over that night as she wants to spend the evening with her friends. Unable to bear it, Calvin decides to make a small change in the manuscript at night after all.
Calvin, I want to come home.
Guy's idea works. From that moment on, Ruby is constantly by his side and does not want to be separated for even a minute. However, this behavior leads to unintended consequences. Ruby starts throwing tantrums at the slightest occasion and becomes an unhappy person. To remedy this, Calvin sits down at the typewriter again and adds a new line that refers to Ruby's uncontrollable joy despite what is happening around her. Unfortunately, he fails to achieve the desired result. Now Ruby begins to behave completely unnaturally and continues to have fun even when it is not appropriate. This forces Guy to change the manuscript once again in the hope of getting things back to normal. On this particular evening, the couple attends an event organized by a famous writer. The literary agent notices Calvin and immediately takes him away for a business conversation, leaving Ruby alone among strangers. Out of boredom, she goes to the pool where the owner of the mansion starts flirting with her. Kel approaches the pool at that moment.
What's going on here?
Calvin, we thought we'd take a dip.
Back home, a fight breaks out between the two, during which Ruby tells Calvin that she's not his toy and that he can't order her around. Calvin admits that he has been doing exactly that and silently goes to his office to confirm his words. Offended girl is about to leave, but an invisible force pushes her away from the exit. Confused, she looks at Calvin, who extends his novel to her and finally confesses. He adds more lines as proof, and then the situation becomes truly chaotic. Ruby suddenly starts speaking French, snapping her fingers, undressing, and singing. She then behaves like a dog, jumps up abruptly, and confesses her love to Guy.
I love you. I'll never leave you. You're a genius. You're a genius. You're a genius. You're a genius.
When it's all over, Ruby immediately leaves and locks herself in the bedroom. In tears, Kel goes to the typewriter one last time to complete the final novel, in which Ruby ceases to be his creation, forgets everything, and most importantly, becomes completely free. He places the finished novel under the bedroom door, hoping that Ruby will come out and read it. Then he goes down to spend the night in the living room. In the morning, Kel finds the front door open and realizes that Ruby is gone forever.
Calvin, you okay?
During a walk, Gary advises his brother to publish a novel. After all, readers will assume it is just fiction, and no one will believe what happened. After hearing advice, Cal decides to do so but completely changes Ruby's image, name, and distinctive features to avoid accidentally hurting her. The book becomes a huge success, and all critics and readers highly appreciate the work of our protagonist. At the end of the movie, Calvin takes a walk in the park with his dog. Scotty catches a familiar scent and runs up to a lonely girl who turns out to be Ruby. At this point, she was just reading a story about herself.
Have we met before? So that's why you look so familiar.
May I sit down?
Oh, please. Just don't tell me how it ends, okay?
Promise.
Thank you to everyone who watched until the end. Share your opinion about the film below in the comments.